Hi, I'm Brandon Curtis. This is my wife, Darlene. We're going to share a little bit about our story. Our story actually begins in '97. I had made a decision to enter the military to not only one, start a career, but to start a family. In '97, January I went to basic training at Fort McClellan, Alabama. Became an MP 17 weeks later. Graduated in May of that same year. About 8 days later from that graduation, we got married. And so our journey together from that point started then.
Had our honeymoon in Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Yep. Next day after marriage, we reported back for duty. And from there, life was actually pretty good for us at the time. Soon after that, was deployed for the first time.
Oh, and we sent you on your way with the news that
Yep.
we were
That's when we were expecting our
first
first
daughter.
So in February '98, I was deployed to Kuwait. That was during one of Saddam Hussein's first uprisings after the Gulf War. After that deployment in '98, we came back. We shortly thereafter were moved to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and that's where a turn in our story began to happen. I was involved in a pretty serious auto accident, which claimed the life of my partner, and ultimately changed the outcome for my career. The dreams that I had as far as what our future was going to look like suddenly came to a halt.
Meanwhile, I was pregnant with our second daughter, and our oldest daughter was 2.5.
Our second daughter was born, and 5 months later, I was actually in a court-martial. Found myself in a courtroom on the other side of law enforcement, getting a whole new perspective of what life was going to be. We went to trial, and on that day of May 1st of 2001, I was sentenced to what my plea agreement was, which was 1 year and 1 day, and said goodbye to my family, and started basically trying to rediscover who I was going to become and what the Lord had in store for us. So while away, that was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I was detained at a minimum security or medium security federal prison. The Lord was already starting to do some work. At the time also inside the chapel, there was a revival going on. So I guess you could say
God was really setting the stage.
Yeah, that was my burning bush, so to speak. That was May, so 9/11 came around. I was still incarcerated. Knowing the events of that day and what surrounded it, my unit and a lot of units that were at Polk and around the country were basically called up and getting ready to go to what has ended up turning to be a really long conflict. We got fired up where we were at, and a lot of us tried to get back, actually re-enlisted, seeing if somehow, some way the courts would make an exception or possibly take us back. Obviously that wasn't the case, and some other things were going on at the time, and I still have those regrets, still wanted to go, still have the desire to serve. I don't think you're ever going to take the military out of a military man, whether he's retired or one way or another just found his way out from the military. They're still,
it's considered an honor.
Yeah, they're still they still have that draw, that desire. You know, they're that 1%. You know, that said, "Hey, I'll go," and but you don't have to. For me, my story kind of took a turn there. I was able to get clemency where I was at, and through good conduct time and just in the areas that I was serving at in the prison there, was able to be released early. I was gone from May 2001 and home before Thanksgiving. So from there, you know, getting out, life was taking on a whole another journey. June of 2002, my wife was working at our local church. We went, it was our home church. She was working in the facilities department with my soon-to-be mentor. He offered me a spot. He said, "Hey, we don't have a whole lot. He goes, I know you don't have any experience in this field, but we have a position open in our landscaping department." I said, "Sure. You know, I'll learn what it is that I need to learn, and if this was the opportunity and the door opening for me to start another path, I wasn't going to turn it away or deny it." About 2.5 years after doing that, the assistant manager at the time announced he was leaving. A year after that, found out that my role was going to be reduced.
Well, we had already seen God rebuild. We kind of thought, what does this mean? Where are we in this? What is God doing?
And I had planned to retire from this position. But again, we found ourselves, you know, back, you know, in the middle, so to speak. I went on for another 6 years with the church, and during that time, a gentleman who had just gotten out of the military as well, a wounded vet, found his way to the church, and I got to talk to him, and he goes, "Hey, I've heard your story." He's like, "I'm working over at the VA, and I'd like you to meet me there tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And I said, "Okay, well, you know, what are we going to do?" You know, I wasn't a wounded vet. You know, all my benefits, you know, from the accident were taken away, so I had no business being around or in that vicinity. He's like, no, once you meet me there, he goes, "We're going to start taking care of you." And I said, "Okay." So I humored him, and I met him down at the VA, and 30 minutes upon walking into that facility, my discharge that I had, which was bad conduct, was upgraded to. So upon being there, I was, you know, basically 30 minutes in, I was reinstated. All my benefits from VA home loan to medical, whatever it was that I would have needed, was restored. I shook his hand and said, "Hey, you know, thank you very much. You know, this means a lot." He said, "Hey, we're not done yet." So I said, "What?"
God's never done yet.
So I said, "You know, what do you mean you're not done yet, or we're not done yet?" He's like, "Oh, there's more." He's like, "I need you to fill out some paperwork." So I sat with him for the next hour and a half. We filled out some paperwork. He said, like, "This next journey is going to be kind of long." He's like, "And it could end up you being in Washington sitting before a panel. Are you up for that?" I said, "Well, you know, hey, I'm here. The Lord's brought me this far. I'm not going to, you know, walk away." So we filled out the paperwork, and we sent it off that day. And he was telling me, you know, you should probably hear something back in about, you know, 3 to 4 months. It takes time for this process to happen. I actually had forgotten all about it, because it was about 6 months later. I received a manila envelope in the mail, and it kind of took me by surprise. I didn't really know what it was. I opened it up, and I saw my my discharge paper, my D-214, and had a big red line. Big red line through it. So I was looking at it, and I'm like, you know, what does this mean? I flipped through some papers that they had in there, and there was a panel of basically military judges, generals and colonels and whatnot, that just reading my packet, just reading the form, just going back over my trial and my notes,
And the true evidence.
yeah, decided basically that I didn't need to come to Washington. I didn't need to sit before them. They had seen enough, they had read enough, they had heard enough through letters that were submitted on my behalf, that basically my upgrade happened again. And it went from a general, other than honorable, to a general under honorable conditions. So basically I was given a discharge, basically one level under an honorable discharge. I called this individual up and I said, hey, you'll never imagine what I received in the mail today. I said, I got, you know, a response back from Washington. He said, hey, so when do we get on the plane? When do we go and sit before the panel? I said, no, we don't need to. I said,
say what?
Yeah, and he goes, this never happens. He's like, this doesn't happen. This is
Don't ever get some.
You don't ever
four
get
people signing off on this
without ever talking to you. So
God performed a miracle.
he's like, hey, I need to meet with you tomorrow morning. So I said, okay. So I came in and showed him the paperwork, and he's like, hey, the next step is on you. And this kind of gets where we're at now. You know, this next part is on me as far as getting the presidential pardon, and it's extensive. It's paperwork that has got to be submitted, but that's the only thing now that's holding this whole thing back from being fully restored. So I guess in this whole story, you know, the restoration story is what's come out of it.